Hello, everyone. We are glad to welcome you at our informational seminar within the framework USFS Water Quality BMPs for Ukraine. This project is implemented in cooperation and with the support of the Forest Service of the USA, and we're extremely glad that both our Ukrainian participants and our experts from the USA could join us, and we are glad it happened. So we will start with the greetings, and I am delighted to give the floor to Mr. Igor Budzinsky, the head of the Forest Service of the State Forest Resources Agency of Ukraine. Please, Mr. Igor, you're welcome. Good day, dear participants. Can you hear me well? So good. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to see all of you here today. By the support of the NGO Forza and in the framework of this project activity. And I would like to say that this event intervention is extremely up to date because lately, in the recent years, Ukraine took the path of European integration and chose this way, this path, and it is proved by the events, unfortunately tragic ones in Ukraine. So daily we fight, and the best people pay their lives for this. And that is why we are open to practices present in the world, applied in the world, supported in the whole world, particularly practices of the forest management and the nature devoted forestry management according to the principles of the watersheds. So forestry management and watershed management issues have been appearing for the recent tens of years, decades in our scientists' works and different researches we conducted. We had those issues, and also within the framework of the cooperation with Forza, we also had some researches, and in most cases, we had researches in Carpathian region. That is why for some of our participants of our today's intervention, it wouldn't be something new. It wouldn't be a new topic, unknown topic. They are acquainted, they have some knowledge about this on this issue. And concerning the forest management and the watershed management, I believe we should start with designing of the forest management for the nearest future, nearest years. So it should be conducted while we are trying to administrate and maintain our forest management, to have plans for the decades and plans prescribing different administrative events and activities, forestry activities, including the principles we're going to speak about today. This issue is quite vivid, and such experience is present in our American colleagues. And today we would have an opportunity to hear their experience, to also for them to share with us the experience, for us to understand the tendencies as for the forestry management, and to apply that experience here in Ukraine. So it was fruitful seminar, intervention, workshop, and I would kindly ask everyone, be attentive, having any questions, make notes. I hope that we will have an opportunity to ask questions that you will have and to receive the answers. So please, the organizers, in case there is an opportunity, could we disseminate the presentational materials as for this intervention, and probably to share or to provide access to the record of this seminar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a fruitful meeting. Please, let's start. Thank you so much, Mr. Igor. You have emphasized the important issues, and topics. We are delighted that we have this same understanding of the importance of the watershed and forest management. Cheletsikev, the floor would be yours. Please say a few words, opening remarks. The U.S. Forest Service. You're welcome. Please.
Thank you, Lesia. I wanted to just say good day to everyone and welcome you to this event. As Lesia said, I work with the U.S. Forest Service, specifically in our International Programs Office, and my role is supporting our Ukraine projects. I wanted to first take a moment and acknowledge the challenging circumstances under which we are holding this webinar with the ongoing war in Ukraine, and say that we all hope here in the US for a day when peace is restored to Ukraine. I also wanted to commend Forza, who's hosting this webinar, for their ongoing work in watersheds in Ukraine, both during the COVID-19 pandemic and also now during the war. So a little bit about the Forest Service and why we're doing this work. Our objective is to care for the land and serve people, and that's true both in the United States and also globally. So internationally, we've actually been supporting projects in Ukraine since the early 2000s, and we're very proud to collaborate with civil society organizations like Forza on these projects. We've been partnering with Forza on watershed projects specifically since 2019. One such project is technical cooperation surrounding water quality, dust management practices in Ukraine, which we'll be speaking to a lot today. And this also builds on joint work we previously did surrounding watershed condition classification in Ukraine. And both the watershed condition classification and best management practices are tools that we in the U.S. Forest Service use for the management of our own forests in the U.S. And so we're really excited to share these tools and how they might apply in Ukraine with you today. I also wanted to share that just given the impact the war has on the environment and on watersheds, I also believe these tools are increasingly important in Ukraine. I just wanted to end my remarks by just thanking Forza, my colleagues who are here today and will be presenting, and all of you for joining us for what I'm sure will be an insightful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelet. We are delighted and proud and happy that we have such long-term cooperation with the U.S. Forest Service, and for us to have the opportunity to apply the best practices, not as for the watersheds, but also in the as for the such topics as fire situations and emergency situation management and many other issues, and to apply best practices in Ukraine. Thank you so much. And I would like to check whether Petro Pavlichenko could join us. He's the representative of the Forest Service in Ukraine, and probably he will join us later and we would give the floor to him. I would like to say that Petro Gavrilovich plays a huge role in communication between our NGO and with the authorities on the central level, and it provides us great support in the implementation of the project. A few words how we are going to work today. First of all, I am delighted that we have so many representatives from Ukraine. We have over 60 participants, and it means how topic is important. How we're going to work? We have 3 blocks, 3 parts. We are going to listen to our 3 experts from the USA with the presentations on how the evaluation and monitoring system works, and the systems of the best management practices, how they apply this, how they use these systems, how it's important. And we're going to have a few presentations from Ukraine. My colleagues, Natalia Voloshina and Yuri Derbal, are going to tell us what elaborations we already have within the framework of the cooperation with USFS, We are having this cooperation for a few years, as Charlotte has mentioned, and a few words about the methodological recommendations on the assessment of the impact on the watersheds in Carpathians. Probably some of you have heard this information. We have already presented this variant in June last year, but we have very many people this time. Maybe you haven't heard. We're going also to mention this as well. You can ask questions both to our American experts, English speaking experts, and our Ukrainian experts. For this purpose, you can use chat in case you have a question within while the presentation is still going. You can raise your hand or write your question in chat, or you can do it after the presentation is over. So when the presentation is over, probably it would be better for us not to have any technical issues. 15:30, 15:40 would be the time for the break, and that's it. As for now, it's time
And
to
now it's time to introduce our participants. We've got 60 participants. Nonetheless, we are eager to see you, to hear something from you. And let's arrange this introduction as follows. I've got a list and I will read it out. Please switch on your cameras. This virtual format is special. We got used to it during the time of pandemic. However, this face-to-face contact, this visual contact is incredibly important. Therefore, please turn on your cameras and introduce yourselves. Don't forget to indicate your position and your organization. Okay, Igor, please switch on your camera. We are starting our introduction. First of all, I would like to introduce myself and my team. My name is Lesa Loiko. I represent Forza NGO. We have been active in sustainable forestry activities for 13 years. And 5 years before that, we used to work as a Swiss-Ukrainian project. We got to know many of you at that time, and we value this long-term cooperation extremely. Two experts are with me today, Mr. Yuri Derbal. He is the forester, he is expert in sustainable forestry, as well as Ms. Natalka Voloshina. She's an expert in cooperation with the communities. Actually, she gave rise to this idea. She got trained in the USA, and it's her idea to introduce the American practices to present them to Ukraine, in particular classification watersheds. And our technical support will be ensured by Mr. Kirill Loiko. If you got any issues, please contact him. And now let me go through the list. Mr. Yuri Volos. I'm the chief forester in Kolevsky Beskide. Glad to see you. Thank you. Erich Oberholzer. Please don't forget to unmute yourself. Okay, let's move on. Maybe a bit later. Miss Valentina Meshkova. Good afternoon. I'm the chief researcher in pathophysiology department in the Ukrainian Forestry and Agricultural Amelioration Institute. Thank you for being with us. Ms. Victoria Karpolenko. We can see you. Good afternoon. I'm from Ivano-Frankivsk Department of Forestry. I'm the chief specialist of the department. Glad to see you, Mr. John Carlson.
Hello? Yeah, Joan Carlson. I'm a hydrologist with the U.S. Forest Service in our national office, and I'm glad to be speaking with you today.
Щиро дякуємо. Лісова Аліна.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alina Lisova.
Добре, рухаємося далі.
Okay,
Оксана
let's move on.
Станкевич-Волосенчук.
Oksana Stankiewicz-Волосенчuk.
Тільки що бачила її. Оксана, не чути.
I have just seen her on the screen. Unmute yourself, please. We don't hear you.
Так.
I specialize in ecology.
Мікрофон.
Once again, please unmute yourself.
Тепер
You didn't
чути.
hear me. I represent NGO Ecosphere. I'm environmentalist, ecologist.
Картавцев, будь ласка.
Mr. Kartavtsev, Oleg Kartavtsev. I represent the Public Council at the Ministry of Environment. I'm the head of the committee for environmental impact assessment. I'm in charge of the respective law on the environmental impact assessment, and I would be interested in methodological recommendations. And we would like to continue the cooperation. Thank you. Alexei Kobets. Good afternoon. I work for the Institute of Forestry and Agricultural Melioration. I'm the colleague of Ms. Valentina Meshkova. I'm the secretary in charge of the scientific work. Oksana Fensik. Good afternoon. I'm the deputy head of the state ecological inspection in the Zakarpattia region.
Паулін Адамс.
Ms. Pauline Adams.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pauline. I'm a hydrologist with the U.S. Forest Service. I'll be speaking today. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Щиро дякуємо, Паулін. Тарас Соп.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Mr. Taras Sobko. Good afternoon, dear participants and the chief expert in the Chernivtsi Department of Forestry.
Челет ви вже знаєте, тоді йдемо
So you
до
have
Гір.
already got to know Chalet, and now Ted Geyer, please.
Тед. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Ted Geyer. I'm a retired consulting hydrologist with the Forest Service, and I have had the great privilege of working with Natalia and the Ukrainian and Leshia and the Ukrainians for the last 5 years. But thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Нам також дуже приємно, Тед. А ще приємніше, що сьогодні для
We are also very pleased to see you, and I'd like to add that it's 6 a.m. for many of our American participants. Nonetheless, they are ready to participate. Okay, let's go on. Ms.
Got my
Victoria
coffee.
Gudima.
Got my coffee.
Так, добре. Вікторія.
Victoria
Бондаренко.
Vera Bondarenko is next. Good afternoon. I'm the junior researcher
Дякую
at
дуже.
the Ukrainian Institute of Forestry. Victoria, I've seen you are trying to switch on your camera.
Ярослав Кириленко.
Mr. Yaroslav Kirilenko. Good afternoon. I represent the Ukrainian Research Center of Mountain Forestry. I'm the junior researcher at this institute. I'm happy to be here during this event. Thank you very much. Glad to meet you. We're so glad to see the young experts. Mr. Anatoly Rutenko. Good afternoon. I'm the first deputy head of Cherkasy Department of Forestry and Hunting. We're so glad to see you. Mr. Andriy Kolodizhny. He has submitted a message. to the chat because he cannot use the camera. Ms. Angelika Pecher. We can see you but cannot hear you. Good afternoon. My name is Angelika Pecher from the Zakarpattia Oblast Department. I'm very happy to participate in this conference and to meet all of you and the chief and the senior specialist. Mr. Vadim Koska. Good afternoon. My name is Zaychuk Vitaly. I represent the Cherkassa Department of Forestry. Maybe you'd better rename yourself because as far as you see, you are a substitute for somebody else. Okay, Andrei Klaudishny, no, let's skip him. He has already introduced himself. Mr. Vadim, we don't see you, and then Vasil Dmitry. I work as a chief forester in the School of Forestry. This topic is extremely relevant for us. Thank you, Vasil. Vasil Matejчик. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. I represent Shatsky National Park, Deputy Director. Viktor Tkach. Director of the Ukrainian Research Institute of Forestry and Agricultural Melioration. We wish all the participants a fruitful webinar. Thank you very much. We are impressed by your resilience. Yes, we will be victorians. Mr. Volodymyr Zik cannot switch on his camera, and next will be Mr. Vladimir Shevchenko. Good afternoon. I'm the first deputy head of Luhansk Department of Forestry and Hunting. Thank you very much for your time. Izaslav Forestry, please. This is Vadim Koska. We have renamed ourselves. We have already introduced our participants. Okay, thank you. Sambir Forestry, and then Yarmolinets Forestry. Good afternoon. I'm the head of the Sambir Forestry. It's nice to see so many representatives of the Zakarpattia region. Okay, let's go on. Good afternoon. My name is Kutsky Vadim. I'm the chief engineer in logging, Mr. Igor Bokolo. Good afternoon. Igor Bokolo, head of the Drogobich Forestry. I cannot switch on my camera. Okay, but the main thing for us is to hear you. Ms. Irina Kazabridakova. Good afternoon. I'm the first category researcher at the National Nature Park Boykivshina. Thank you very much, Ms. Irina, Ms. Larissa Levus, and Mr. Mykola Rikovets. Larissa is silent. Then Mr. Mykola. Good afternoon. My name is Mykola Rikovets. I'm the head of the production department, working for the organization involved in forestry issues. Yes, we know your organization. Serhiy Storenko and Oksana Brelinska. Good afternoon. I am the head of the Forest Ecology Department from Kharkiv. Good afternoon. I am the forest a forestry engineer from Slobozhansk Forestry, Miroslav Zvarich and Mikhailo Popkov. Miroslav Zvarich, the head of Zakarpattia Oblast Department for Forestry and Hunting. Thank you.
Дякуємо, пане Михайло.
Good day, everyone. Nice to see all of you.
Христина Шаваринська.
Христина Шаверинська, Хмельницький Forestry. I can see further on, please.
Добре.
Thank you. Хмельницький Oblast Forestry, the head of the office, Олексій Лобода. Thank you.
Тетяна Готра.
Тетяна Готра, Тарас Парпан.
Доброго дня.
Good day, everyone. Тетяна Готра, Басей, Тиса River Watershed Management, Water Cadastre and Water Management. Thank you for watershed management is here. Please, let's move on. Ivano-Frankivsk greets you. Taras Parpan is my name. Ukrainian Scientific and Research Institute of Forest Ecology and Forest Management, the chief researcher. Nice to see you. Rivnenske Forestry, Olha Morozuk. Please.
Ольга, це ви?
Olha, is that you? Or it's Rivna? Good day, everyone. Chief specialist.
Дякую.
Olha Morozuk has written in chat, and those people who can join, you can write the introduction in chat. That is why I would kindly ask you to have a look at chat. So please tell me, I believe that there are some people I have not mentioned because for some reason the list has been changing. So the names have been mixed up. So please turn on your cameras in any order and introduce yourself. We have paid pretty much time for introduction because it's important also for our American experts to understand who is present, to understand what to emphasize and what should be the focus in the presentations, and thus we should know who will work with us in the project within the project in the future. And it's interesting for us, at least distantly, to get to know each other. So please, those of you who have not introduced, yeah, we have a minute or two, please. You're welcome. Good day, everyone. Mikhailo Boyko, Chief Forest Manager, Karpaty County. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Mikhailo.
Добре. Ще хтось?
All right. Anyone else? May I? Yeah, you're welcome, Alina. I missed my last name. Alina Lisova, Cherkasy Forestry Chief Researcher, Chief Manager. Nice to see you all. Thank you. In chat, we have Ternopil Primachuk, Ivan, the deputy head. Mr. Ivan, nice to see you. All right. I believe that we gave an opportunity to everyone to speak up. So in case, someone else in chat. Natalka, have I missed anyone? Unfortunately, I can't see the chat. Andriy Kolodyazhny. Please read it from the chat. Bryslavsky Forestry Chief forest to forest, and a representative without camera, Olha Morozuk, head of the analytics of the forestry, problems with the electricity. Slavodsky Forestry, head of the office, Sergei Boyko, has already introduced himself. Alexander Stoiko, Chief Forester, State Enterprise Litigiv Forestry, Kristina Shavarinska, Lviv Oblast Forestry Management, Ternopil Oblast Forestry and Hunting Management, Primachuk Ivan, First Deputy Head, the Chief Forester from Dnipro, Denisuk Andriy Shepetivka Forestry, the head of the department. Thank you, everyone. In case anyone would like to write something in chat, it's open. So in short, about some rules, I would kindly ask you, in case if you are not speaking at the moment, please turn off your microphone for the camera. So no camera, but for the sound, not to interrupt the speaker. So camera on off as you find it comfortable. We're delighted to see you, at least when there would be the question and answers session. Please turn on your cameras. A few words I would like to say about what we are planning to do within the framework of this project. The USFS water quality BMPs for Ukraine. I would like to start sharing my screen. Hope it will work.
Ні, чекайте. Видно презентацію, так?
Can you see my presentations? Yeah, we can see you, but please make it in the full screen mode.
Ой, завжди ж проблема.
It's always an issue to activate that mode.
Так, зараз секундочку.
In a second,
Так, поки ми включаємо
while we're
презентацію,
trying to turn on the presentation, to share the presentation, I would like to say that this project,
зараз триває.
the ongoing project,
Він
is
логічно витікає
it logically comes from the project we had before in cooperation with the USFS, and Natalka will say some more about this. In short, I would like only to say it in a few words. We had this project since 2021, and we initially planned
розпочати вже його
to launch its active implementation in 2022. But in the second part of 2021, we had COVID.
Видно екран?
Can you see my screen now? Yeah, we can see a screen.
Ось, і ми
So
відклали,
we have postponed it
наші заходи.
to have our events and activities offline. But unfortunately,
Агресія Росії проти України
Russian aggression against Ukraine
наші плани.
has impacted our plans.
Добре, давайте я розкажу,
Okay,
бо це
I would like to say it in a few words because I cannot share my presentation, so I will say it with my own words. I will turn on my camera.
В мене завжди якась проблема з цим.
There is always an issue with the technical
на початку.
modes. It seems to me that we have already tried to turn it on at the beginning, but it didn't work. The goal of our project
Є передача
is
технічних та
to
практичних знань
provide technical and practical knowledge on classification of the watersheds and the best management practices
партнерам з України.
to the experts from Ukraine. When we're speaking about those technical knowledge, we also expect much and we rely much on our American experts because they are those who have that expertise. They also apply those practices, and we hoped that after COVID is over, our American specialists would come to us and work here in Ukraine. But unfortunately, COVID and war have impacted our plans. Nevertheless, our project is on. We are trying to modify it, and we plan to conduct all of the events for our target audience. The target audience is the researchers, specialists of the forest management, forest engineers, chief foresters, and chief engineers and chiefs of the forestry enterprises. You know that the reform is on. Nevertheless, we plan to work with the affiliates of the state agencies in Karpati region and more broadly. So thank you for you are with us. The logic of the project is quite simple. We have some celebrations, we have some practices, we have already trial here in Ukraine, and we planned all of the information, all the knowledge, and even legal changes and amendments to deliver all of them to specialists here in Ukraine. And we planned to do this by means of two trainings. The first one on classification of the watersheds with a specialist on the forest management. Igor Leonidovich has emphasized today that he can see this issue of the watershed principle should be even more involved into the forest management guideline. We will speak about classification of the watersheds when managing the forest, what to rely on, what uh, one of the trainings would be devoted to this, and the second training is on the best management practices for the functioning of the watersheds, quality of the watersheds, and adaptation and mitigation of the climate changes impacts. We're speaking much about this as among the NGOs, specialists. In Sharm el-Sheikh, we also had an intervention. The practices working, they have already been tried. They, so we wanted by means of the education to transfer that knowledge to our Ukrainian specialists. Offline trainings, we planned trainings for 5 days in the fields, but unfortunately we have to move online. We are getting ready to this, and if you do not mind, we will use your contacts to information to invite you to our further events. So in short, about our project, in case you have any questions. And as for the plans, question, so we plan to have online last training since next year, and project would last for the middle of the 2023. So I believe we can success to do everything, we can manage it all. And I would like to give the floor to Natalka Voloshina. We and we still have some time for this, and she's going to speak about the activities and the events that had happened prior to our cooperation with the Forest Service. Thank you, Leslie. I will try to be short. In fact, I have Ted, John, and Pauline would make it in full capacity, and I will warm up our audience before them. So slides were at the side. Now full screen mode, but we can see it. Great background. Again, same issues. Can you see it right now? Yeah, everything works great. I wanted in short to remind you what was prior to our current project. So to bring back, so to speak about some steps we have taken to introduce you to this and to introduce you the elaborations on the watershed management and water quality. I'm trying to change the slides. Double keyboard, I'm trying. What's wrong? We have tried everything half an hour before the streaming. In case it doesn't work, Maybe Kirilo can try to fix this. I'll try once again. Probably the network is overloaded. It might be a reason. Is switch. I can do this. Then I'll come back to another mode. So I hope it can work better.
Excuse me, Lesia.
Yes.
This is Ted. You could try having people turn off their video cameras of their face, because that's taking up a lot of resources.
Та, можливо, Тед пропонує виключити поки камери, поки...
So the suggestion is to turn off cameras as we don't have the communication. Probably it takes some part of the network, but Natalka, continue, please. It works good. I believe it's okay.
Є щось? Переходить, клацає?
Ні.
Can you see it switching? No.
Це клацає, але вже не клацає. Добре.
Все,
Yes,
перейшло.
I can switch.
Добре.
Move on.
Хто знає нашу організацію, нашу команду, то знає, що ми
You
працюємо
know,
з
in our team, we work on the watersheds and watershed
Я хочу згадати,
principle of planning.
де ми є, і фокус нашої діяльності завжди
In
в
short, where we are,
Карпатському регіоні.
we work in Carpathian region.
Екосистема, і
This is the vulnerable ecosystem,
саме вона потребує
and it requires changes.
практичних
And the Carpathians, as a vulnerable region, require changed approach in management practices. In 2010, we participated in a Swiss-Ukrainian project in the Carpathian Mountains. I'm very pleased to see Mr. Erich Oberholzer among our participants. He has been our expert, our advisor, and he has helped our organization to implement changes. This project actually gave rise to the current initiative. This is the example of planning we were involved in 2006 to 2010. I think you are very well familiar with this picture. As to the activities preceding the current event, the new start was seen in 2015. I was privileged to participate in a US conference on watersheds, and there I learned about classification of watersheds, and I was really impressed by the simplicity and the efficiency of this idea. I informed our expert Yuri on this system, on this framework, let's say, and then we involved Mr. Leonid Korzhov. He has become our supporter. Afterwards, in 2017-2019, we represented the watershed classification to a group of experts. We've arranged a two-day webinar, and during this webinar, we presented the WCF. In 2019-2022, we continued working on the project entitled Classification of Watersheds Conditions, Transfer of Knowledge from the US Forest Service. And now this is actually the next stage of the project. We proceeded gradually. First, we introduced these new ideas to the Ukrainian community, and further on, we would like to see the idea enshrined in the legal and regulatory acts. Let me briefly show you the pictures. This is Mr. Salek Shafikula, hydrologist from the Forest Service US. He is talking about the best management practices, about WCF. It was a real discovery for me. In 2017, Mr. Ted Geyer visited us. He is with us today. We are so grateful. He has been working with us for quite a long time. He has been very helpful in providing materials that might be really useful for our foresters, and he is our speaker today as well. Here on the screen, you see the pictures made during this webinar. At the webinar, we presented the concept of watershed condition framework. Actually, we discussed whether this idea has a chance to be implemented in Ukraine. Now you see several pictures. This is the end of our webinar. You see a beautiful picture painted by Ted's wife, Ms. Getty. She is fond of patchwork, and this is the picture representing our Carpathian Mountains, Goverla and Petros. At the same time, some lectures were held in Uzhgorod and Lviv. During the lectures, students had an opportunity to learn about the new approaches toward forest management. Ted was a lecturer, and he talked about the US approaches. These pictures were made in the Lviv University. In 2018, we held quite a rigorous training. It lasted for a week. It was practical. It included many practical exercises, and actually this training focused on watershed condition. Participants of the training started indicator after indicator, and in the end, the group had to produce the assessment of the Pinya River. During this training, the participants learned how to apply the WCF on the example of Ukrainian watersheds. This is the picture made during the training. More pictures. That's what it looked like. Yes, it was quite rainy weather. We also started the remote probe methods. These are the participants working with the maps. So the training was quite intensive and interesting. We got lots of information pertaining to our data gaps and data collection mechanism and data assessment. After that, the next step was a short project entitled Transfer of Experience from the US Forest Service. And our next speaker will briefly inform you on the methodological recommendations produced during this project. A group of experts developed a draft recommendation set for Ukraine on the basis of the American WCF. We're so happy to see Ms. Oksana and Mr. Volodymyr Savchenko. These are the experts who participate in the expert team at that time. Actually, they delivered a huge amount of work. There were lots of proposals, and these proposals actually were adapted to the Ukrainian context. As a result, the group has come up with a set of recommendations. This is the composition of the team: Ms. Oksana, Mr. Roman, Korzhov Vladimir, Yemlenits Taras, Mr. Savchenko. The ongoing project is our current step. We are deeply convinced that the next steps will come very soon. We expect that our cooperation will deepen, and we hope that experts will help us with further improvements. Thank you very much for your attention. In case of any questions, I will be happy to address them.
Леся, в тебе відключений.
Lesa, you are muted. I'm so sorry. Thank you very much, Natalka. It seems that we are experiencing a delay. In case of questions, please forward them to the chat or keep them till the end of the webinar. Oh, I'm so happy now to hand it over to Mr. Ted Geyer. This is an important person for our cooperation. He is a co-author of WCF approach developed in the USA. And today he will present the WCF and the monitoring done by the US Forest Service. Ted, over to you. Hopefully you will succeed with demonstration with sharing the screen.
Okay, again, it's great to be with you, and I'm going to put put this on presentation mode now, and I want to make sure you can see it. Do you see it?
Ще ні.
Do you see it in Ukrainian?
Not yet. We do not see anything at the moment. We see just you.
Okay, because okay, do you see this screen?
We
Do you
see
see
you.
this moving?
No,
We still see just you.
Do you
Perhaps
see
you,
the English?
no,
see
we
the
don't see
English
anything. You have to turn on the
Wait.
demonstration.
Hang tight, hang tight. My bad.
Button.
Just a minute. Working on it.
Це якісь сьогодні якісь заколдовані презентації, але ми сподіваємося, що все спрацює.
It's a bit chaotic today with these presentations. They are
Okay,
enchanted.
Here we go.
Not yet?
Do you see anyone on the link?
Please
Ted,
try
you
share
need-
screen.
I am. Do you see me yet?
We don't see yet the presentation. Nothing has changed
Just
so
a
far.
second. Let's
Може
go.
тоді, що Тед, можливо, Кирило тоді запустить?
Maybe we will ask Kirill
Minute.
to launch your presentation instead of you.
Okay, what about now?
Now we see the presentation.
You see the presentation. So do you see the Ukrainian presentation or the English?
English.
So what you're seeing is this, right?
Yes.
Okay. You don't want to see that. What we need to do here is do this, do this, do this,
Super.
and do this.
Yes. Perfect. You can start. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Great.
Well, okay, again, I'd like to, just thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and I'm continually in awe of the Ukrainian people and the way you move forward with things like this in the face of such difficulties that you're having right now. Hopefully this presentation will refresh some of your memories and introduce this to people who haven't seen it. Let's see. So I wanted to start a little bit of a background so you can get kind of a framework for where this whole thing came about. I want to start just very briefly here back in the 18th and 19th century when the United States was first being settled. We had a lot of trees and we had a lot of really big trees. Okay, click. You should see. Okay, now hang tight. Now, when I click, you're seeing my switch, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
You're seeing a little kind of a horse and
Yes.
a little machine
Horse
there. Okay,
people
good.
and the machine. Yes.
Good. Okay. At the same time that we were settling the eastern portion of the United States and even the West, it was concurrently with the Industrial Revolution. And so we had a lot of machinery, we had a lot of trees, and we had a lot of new shiny machinery for cutting down trees. And we cut a lot of trees in the eastern United States at that time.
Excuse me, Ted, our participants are indicating that they don't hear the translation. Інші учасники, скажіть, будь ласка, чи чути переклад? Плюсиком в цей в чат.
Do I need to do something?
No, not you at the moment. Just
Okay.
wait a second.
Just a second.
Будь ласка, ще хтось із учасників, напишіть в чаті, чи чути вам переклад.
Або вімкніться, скажіть, що
Так.
або покажіть ось так.
Ага, хтось ні, хтось так. Ні, не чути переклад. Кирил, що ми можемо зробити?
Перекладачів перевірити, чи в них з'єднання є.
Все добре.
Interpreters are here.
Якось так дивно розділилися наші тут учасники, учасниці.
Чи може це буде пов'язано з тим, що два аккаунти плюс і є якийсь...
Можливо. Добре, бачимо
Добре.
плюс. Давайте продовжуємо тоді. Сподіваємося, що поправиться для всіх.
So probably let's continue. Hope it can be fixed with the time. So let's continue our presentation.
Добре чути, видно, продовжуємо. Please,
So we
Ted.
can see here.
What do you see? Do you see a big horse-drawn
Big
cart
loads
with a
of-
huge bunch of logs?
Yes.
Okay, I can pick up here then. Just real quick, you see, I mean, the Industrial Revolution, we figured out how to cut trees, and we cut lots of them. We cut many, many, many trees. The effects on the land were quite devastating. These are just some pictures from early in the 20th century. You know, we decimated entire landscapes. Most of the eastern half of the United States was harvested. And the effects of that were, you know, there was a lot of deforestation, there was lost soil productivity, we had erosion, gullying, mudslides. Actually, there were health hazards or, you know, safety hazards here, and then there was a lot of flooding. Now, the effects on the water were pretty much equally as devastating. When we cut all these trees, we would take them and slide them down into rivers. We would roll them off the hillside down into rivers. We had all sorts of cool ways to do this. And as you can see, the rivers filled up. We had, you know, I'm going back and forth between two slideshows here so I can read off the screen. What you're seeing here, the impacts on the rivers and on the waterways were sedimentation, bank and channel damage, habitat degradation and loss, and then just, you know, tremendous mortality of the, you know, biota in the rivers and streams themselves. So that led to the Organic Act of 1897 that was designed to improve and protect the forest. There are basically three goals: improve and protect the forest, protect water resources, and to provide a continuous supply of timber, which is in all of our, you know, everybody's interest. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail here, but I wanted to just touch bases here, because The Organic Act led to this legal framework of laws. We had the Multiple Use Sustain Yield Act in 1960. We had the Environmental Policy Act in 69 and the National Forest Management Act in 1976. And these, I just wanted to emphasize, I'm so glad there are such a variety of folks here, because the watershed condition framework and the BMP program, they don't exist in a void. They didn't just come out of nowhere. There's got to be a legal policy framework here, a solid one, for them to function properly. And I'm so glad that Ukraine is moving in that direction, because without this, these programs don't work. And so just wanted to give that as a background. So watershed condition framework, what exactly is this thing? It is a 6-step management process. It is basically designed to first identify the problems and the issues that you have in a watershed, what's going on, step A. Then the rest of the steps involve in identifying priorities and then systematically addressing problems, and then basically tracking what you've done and being able to continue to manage the watersheds in a proper fashion. Looking at it graphically, it looks like this. Step A is the watershed classification, which I know you're making great strides on, but there's 6 other steps to this whole management framework, and we're going to go briefly through these. Let's see. Like I said, I'm going back and forth here, so bear with me. The step A, the first step, and this is what I spent a lot of time on when I visited Ukraine, is the classification. We have a technical guide for watershed classification. Many of you have seen this. I know it's been translated into Ukrainian. But the assessment, the classification is on the left-hand side here. It's a coarse scale assessment of many watersheds at one time. It is GIS based. Again, you look at multiple watersheds over large areas. On the right, you basically do, the way we have it, we divide it into 3 condition classes, either properly functioning, functioning at risk, or impaired. And the technical guide provides the criteria and guidelines for doing this. And it provides a fairly consistent approach across the Forest Service lands in the United States for doing this. I'm going to give a little bit of an example here from the Wayne National Forest in southeastern Ohio. If you zoom into that forest, you see, here's a map of the watersheds. And without getting too far into the weeds here, or too confusing, the scale we are working at. We are working at the scale of rather small watersheds, 4,000 to 10,000 hectares for the classification. Now, I've been asked why that scale, and the simple reason is that's a good manageable scale in a way, because if you take these larger watersheds, you really can't. There's almost too much environmental noise there to get any idea if you're making any difference. So this is a good manageable scale. There's nothing magic about it. This is just a scale that we are working at. Again, if you look, this is the scale that we are. This is the scale that we look at. We classify the watersheds into properly functioning class 1, 2, and 3, properly functioning, managing at risk, or impaired at this scale. Again, bear with me. I'm going back and forth between my English and Ukrainian slides here. If you look at what this model looks like, it is a model. Watershed condition class on the top is a function of both aquatic processes and terrestrial processes. These are broken down again into aquatic physical processes, aquatic biological processes, terrestrial physical, and terrestrial biologic. And what we use to do the classification are indicators. There are 12 of them, as you can see on the slide. Each of these indicators has what we call attributes. For example, the aquatic habitat indicator has two attributes: habitat quality and channel condition. And the forest health indicator has two also. Ozone and insects and disease, I believe. Just a second, let me scroll down here in mine. Yeah, insects and disease and ozone. These are the things that are actually scored by the forest specialists. Then what happens is that each indicator score is an average of the attribute scores. Then what you see is that this gets rolled up. Just a second. Just a second, I lost my screen. All right. These get rolled up basically by average. Just a second, I have to get my, I lost my screen.
But we see it.
Yeah, but I don't see my English version. That's the problem. Bear with me. All right. So
We see Ukrainian.
yep, this is where I want to be. This is where I need to be with you. Give me one more second here while I get back where I need to be. Okay, so what you see here is that the watershed condition class is basically a weighted average of the indicator scores. So the indicators are an average of the attribute scores. The watershed classification is a weighted average of the indicator scores based on their aquatic their processes, the aquatic processes of the terrestrial. And the thing I really want to emphasize about this, the researchers will see this here right off the bat. This is not a scientific tool. This is a management and a communication tool. It allows you, what it does is it allows you to see what the issues are in a holistic fashion in your watershed and gives you an idea of the severity of them, but it is not a scientific model. And so this was done, this is just the eastern quarter, the northeastern quarter of the United States. But, we've got all of our watersheds classified using this tool. So now, once you've got the classification, you move on to the second step here, step B, basically identify priority watersheds. And the long and the short of it is, you've got all these watersheds classified. You kind of know where your issues are, where your problems are, but you can't address everything at once. So the next step in this process is to identify priorities, where you need to do your work, and you know, identify costs and all that kind of thing. So what the heck? I really apologize here. For some reason, I don't know why this is, I am losing. I know how to get it back.
Ed, would it be easier if Lesia and Natalia shared the Ukrainian version and you just looked at your English version?
Maybe so. I don't know. I can get this here. For some reason, I'm not sure why.
Добре,
I mean,
Тед, зараз ми спробуємо. Дякую.
Ted will try to do this. We will try to share.
Okay, I got mine up right now. If you know, you just want to try to go with this one more time. If this screws up again, then let it go. We identify priority watersheds. We're identifying them based on a number of factors. And, you know, there's national direction, regional emphasis, forest, a number of things, and partnership interests, local interests, you know, local political interests, needs and issues. The point I want to make here is it's not just the color. You don't go after, you know, we don't go after, you know, all of our impaired watersheds just because they're red and impaired. A lot of times you can put way too much money into something like that. You do much better with, you've got a watershed in good shape, spend some money to keep it there. You have one that's functioning at risk, do some, you know, do some work in there to bring it up to fully functioning. But you don't need to just do a red watershed because it's red. That's the only point that I really want to make here, because that's, a lot of times that's a misconception that I have to, you know, deal with folks. So step C now. Once you've identified your priorities, you develop a watershed action plan. The plan is an actual written document that explains what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, it describes the watershed, the problems, the issues, that kind of thing, what you're going to do and where you're going to do it. So step C, develop the plan for each watershed. Let's see here. You've got to identify essential projects within these watersheds if you're going to address issues. So let's see, just a second. Yeah, I'm having issues. This thing keeps trying to shut this thing off on me, and I don't know why.
Ted, would you mind if
No, I don't mind at all.
we show the presentation and you will look at your English slides and we will change the Ukrainian slides.
That might work better because I'm having issues here and I don't know why.
Let us share the screen from Forza with your presentation. You
Okay.
probably open the same slides in English and then you will just say next slide and Kirill will change the slides. How about this?
No, that sounds great.
Okay. So we will wait until you open your English slides.
My English slide is open.
Okay. So then just when you feel like we need to change the slide, you just tell next.
Okay. Which slide are you on now?
We are on the step C, and with the, what are the main projects and the red map. Yes.
Okay.
And then photos come up. Yes, 4 photos come up.
And 4 photos come up and it has gullying, fuels, degraded stream banks, etc.
Exactly. Mhm.
And you see at the top, essential project equals specific problems that need to be
Exactly.
fixed.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, let me do this. Now, what are you seeing now? Same thing?
Yes.
Okay, so, okay, good. So you're seeing your Ukrainian version.
Yes, we see the Ukrainian version and we see now pink arrows pointing at some document.
Pink arrows pointing at some. Okay, so it says watershed problems become essential projects in the plan.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so but again, when you make this, when this is an action plan that identifies problems that need to be addressed. So I'm using 4 examples here: severe gullying, hazardous fuels, undersized crossings, and degraded stream banks. These problems become the essential projects in the watershed restoration action plan. Okay, click. Now, do you see a chart that says step D, implement the plan?
Yes.
Good. Click again. So you have all these issues that go into this plan. Step D, implementing the plan, click, is basically these problems become the essential projects in the plan. So implementing the plan means complete the projects. So you're seeing all these pictures. In our example, we've got, where we had degraded soils, we did soil restoration, where we had hazardous fuels, we did prescribed burns, culvert replacements, restore stream banks. You're seeing this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you're seeing the restoration projects.
Oh, no.
They need to
Наступний
click.
слайд, Кирил.
Click.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's basically what step D is. You implement this plan, you address the issues you need to address, and then you move on. Click. So now we're moving on to step E, which is to track the accomplishments.
Yes.
Okay. Click. Basically, we have a watershed improvement tracking system. It's a GIS database. Click. Where you put our soil restoration, whatever work we do, it goes into this database for using in this example. Click. Prescribe burning, same thing. Everything you do in this plan goes into this database. Click. Culvert replacement, ditto. Click. Where we had to do actual in-stream restoration, stream bank restoration, it goes in there. All the things we have to do go into this database. So we know what we did, and we know where it was, and we have a record of it, how much it costs, what good it did, the whole 9 yards. Sorry, that was an idiom. Click. Step F in this is to monitor then and validate what you've done. Click. You validate the classification of these completed watersheds. In other words, click. You step F, monitor and verify. You have a red, you have a red watershed that was non-functioning or impaired. You check it out and determine, click. And you use whatever means you have to make the call. Did you actually improve this watershed or not? Click. So step F, once you monitor and validate these completed watersheds, click. the way we go at it, we identify new watersheds and repeat the process over again for the new watersheds that we looked at. So that in a nutshell is the watershed condition framework. It's a management tool to help. What we used it for was to identify problems within a watershed that needed actual restoration work. Now, where we're going in this workshop, and it's really good that we are. This is kind of a reactionary process because we're actually looking at problems, what needs to be fixed, what happened, how do we address it, and it's righting past wrongs. The BMP program, which Joan is going to be talking about, it's incredibly important because what that does, it helps you to avoid the kind of problems that we're trying to address with the watershed condition framework. So at this point, I will just go ahead and click. Are there any questions and discussion about this?
Та, щиро дякую, Тед. Не дивлячись на
Thank you very much, Ted.
що у нас були певні технічні
In
You are
spite
welcome.
of some technical issues,
питання, я думаю, що наші
we
учасники
managed
зрозуміли
to understand two main things, I believe. First, WCF is not a scientific tool. It's a very practical tool. It is
Yes.
intended for decision making as well as for communication
Yes.
of results. So the community shall be informed by means of this tool. And another thing we have understood, it's a comprehensive system. It is constituted by 6 steps. We in Ukraine are making just step 1, and all other steps will depend on our first step. And we have a question from Mr. Oleg Kartavtsev. Is it possible to come up with a methodology which can be used as the part of a systemic methodology for environmental impact assessment? So, for example, it can be used for assessing environmental risks during environmental impact assessment, or there are other approaches. If so, can we learn about these approaches? So, 2 parts of the question. First, whether this methodology can be used as a part of environmental impact assessment. So maybe first you will answer this portion of the question.
I definitely think it could. Matter of fact, I think that'd be a great use to put it to and a great augmentation of the process. Typically, to my knowledge, we have not done that here. But I think it certainly could be because, you have, when you're doing forest management work, you have risk factors associated with them. So I think the answer to that is yes, but we haven't done it at this point.
Дякую, Тед. І друга частина запитання, так, як оцінка екологічного
The next portion of the question.
What was the next portion of the question?
Для мене не дуже зрозуміла ця частина, як оцінка екологічного.
The evaluation of the so this is the continuation the previous one, the ecological risk in the so this tool is not used as a part of the impact on the environment, even though it can be a part of the process.
I think so, yes. If you look at the steps, you're basically identifying existing issues. It would have to be, I think it would have to be modified, but I think it certainly could be. I mean, that would be, I think it certainly could be. But if you look at this point, it's you're identifying problems, you're identifying problems on the ground, your essential projects, they're already existing, and you're basically fixing problems and then tracking tracking it.
Мгм.
So answer yes to both those questions, but we haven't done it yet, to my knowledge, unless some entrepreneurial forest in the United States has started using it, adapting it for that purpose.
Мгм. Дякую, Тед. Бачу руку Джоан Карсон. Прошу, Джоан.
John Carson, you're welcome. I can see your hand.
Yeah, this is Joan. I don't mean to contradict Ted, but yes, we are
Please
using it.
do.
Well, we are using it for our environmental analyses. Even though it wasn't designed specifically for that purpose, we do use it to describe what we call the affected environment, or basically what the current conditions are when we're planning a project. And then when we look at what we plan to do, then we can assess what the effects of that project will be on the various components of the classification part, and then we can make some judgments as to whether the impacts will be improvements to those constituents or not. So we are using it in that for our environmental analysis and planning.
Hey, thanks,
Дякую.
Joan. That's cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Дякую, Джоан, що вона уточнила.
Thank you, John, for your comment. Thank you for the answer. So in the current situation, current circumstances, we can use the same tool to have the assessment of the impact on the environment. Any questions to Ted, please? We don't have anything in chat. Maybe someone would like to ask something. Serhiy Sidorenko, please.
Thank you for presentation. It was really amazing, and despite some technical issues. Unfortunately, I'm not a hydrologist. I am a fire scientist, and maybe my question will be a little bit silly for you. But anyway, is it possible to provide some basic assessment of wildfire impact and watershed assessment based only on remote sensing data? Or we need a lot of some specific data that we can gather only on the ground? Thank you.
Joan would be able to address this more. Yes, the Forest Service has geospatial methods for looking at fire risk and fire damage. And the watershed condition assessment, if you look at it right now, the classification, I don't have it right in front of me, but let me go back here on mine. If you look at the classification, fire regime is currently an indicator under terrestrial biologics. So we do look at that. In the watershed classification here, the fire regime indicator is a little bit outdated. They have more up-to-date methods now. But the answer to your question is yes, and I think Joan could talk about this more more comprehensively than I can.
Yeah, so we do use GIS remote sensing when we evaluate our burned areas, and we produce what they call a burn intensity or burn severity map. And my understanding is that that is all done via remote sensing. And I believe they also do like vegetation mapping from remote sensing too, to see what the effects of the fire were.
So, John, if I got it right, so that the remote sensing just itself, only and exclusively the remote sensing is not enough. One needs to go to the field and gather some data on the site. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we use the remote sensing to develop a preliminary map, and then we go out in the field and verify the mapping that was done from the remote sensing product.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Чи є ще запитання, шановні учасники і учасниці?
Maybe any questions, dear participants? Serhiy, was it the answer to your question?
Так. Ще, будь ласка, запитання.
More questions? I can't see as for now. Nevertheless, you'll have an opportunity. Now I suggest us to take a 5 minutes break, not the 10 minutes. If you agree, 5 minutes break. maybe 6 minutes, and we will see each other at 16:10. Please don't leave the meeting, just turn off the sound, the microphone, mute, take a cup of coffee, tea, and have a rest. See you in some 6 minutes.
Hey, Natalia and Lesya.
Yes.
Yes.
Kathy would love to say hi to you both at some point.
Thank you.
Yeah, we
You
will
know,
be glad
she would
to.
like to come on screen and actually see you face to face.
Okay, sure.
When you have a second.
Yes. You mean
Hey,
after or
Kathy?
now? Yeah. Okay.
Here you go. Have a seat.
All right, where is she?
Have a seat.
Hello.
She is right. There you
Hi,
go.
Natalia. So do I
Hey,
look, which one do I look at? The
You
computer?
want to look at this one, even though.
Yes, that's me here. I
Oh my
always
gosh.
mix up with which hand should I wave with this.
So we are on different computers. Me and Lesya are on different computers.
Okay, I see you both. Lesya, I like your haircut.
Oh, thank you so much. I like your too.
Now what happened?
And actually,
Let's look up here.
we had today in Natalia's presentation the slide, if you remember, with your quilt that you brought.
my.
Yes, and
You
all the
okay?
group of people, yeah.
Yeah, you were a star of the show. You didn't see that. You were in the other room. They had a picture of all us, and you were holding up your Carpathian Mountain.
Oh, my Carpathian quilt.
Yes, it's famous.
It's famous.
Famous and
How are
legendary.
you? Are you guys holding up okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So
I
far,
know
so
it's-
good. Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
horrible what we hear, and I
Yeah.
just keep praying for you guys every day, and it's like, oh God. Anyway,
I know.
I'm so sorry this is happening.
I can't believe the way you guys are just moving forward with life and with these programs in the face of what Putin is doing. It's just
The
stunning.
orcs, at the face of the orcs.
But have you seen those people from Kharkiv and Luhansk? And, you know, for us, we are fascinated with these people because we are, it really, the time shows that we are in the safest part of Ukraine.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you know, it's we can afford, let's say, moving forward. But you know how these people work. That's a pure, you know, heroic. For me, I mean, that's.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. It's just awful.
Your army, your soldiers are just wonderful. They're so brave and so strong, and I just love them. Your soldiers,
Yeah.
the Ukrainian army. Okay, they're just, I'm just in awe of how wonderful they are, and how much they've sacrificed, and how they just keep going, and they're so strong, and I'm just in complete awe.
That's, I mean, for all of
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
It's unbelievable what they are doing, you know, and how
Yeah.
tough and how
Mhm.
tough and how
Oh, yeah.
brave they are, you know, and
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
we all thank every day for our
Mhm.
safety and for the possibility that we can go on and work and do things, and that's.
How's Teresa?
She's good, thank you. She's running around. She's now with grandma.
I heard her in the background.
Yeah, but she's with a grandmother doing something, you know, but she once in a while, grandmother doesn't allow her to do something like, you know, painting on the box or something. And she comes to me to check, you know, if that's true. And then I say, no, you can paint.
Lesya, how are your parents doing? And I see your sister and brother's posts every once in a while on Facebook. Are you there, Lesya?
Muted, Lesya, you are muted.
Muted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, thank you. They are fine. Also, worrying much about their relatives who are on the occupied areas and also
Oh my gosh.
close to the front line.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
And that's, you know,
Are your brothers, are they still in Poland or they're home? They're home now, aren't they?
Now they are home now, yes. They
Yeah, that's what I
continue,
thought.
yeah, they continue education here and yeah, they came back, I think middle of summer.
Okay. Yeah, I see their posts on Facebook once in a while. Your sister's beautiful pictures and her hair flowing in the breeze. Oh, to be young again. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in 1 minute our participants are back and we will continue.
Oh,
Natalia is
okay.
showing you something. Natalia muted, you are muted.
I think that this box will reach you beginning
Oh,
next
there we
There it
go.
is.
There we go.
beginning next year. This box will reach you because we hope that Sheila will come and we will have a chance to send some goods to you.
Awesome. Okay.
Sheila.
Oh, that would be so awesome. I check with her on Facebook too. I remember our translator, Igor, and I hope he's doing okay too, but she was pretty hush hush about what he's doing and where he is. And so I haven't asked anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, Katie, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We need to go
All
on.
right. Playtime's over. Wow, it's so wonderful seeing you too.
Same here.
Right.
Дякуємо.
Someday I want to come back.
Okay.
So,
Will.
okay, bye-bye.
Wait for you.
Bye-bye. Дякуємо, шановні учасниці і учасниці, що ви вчасно повернулися. Тим часом
Thank you, dear participants, for coming back. Meanwhile, we had a conversation with Katie Geyer, Ted's wife, and she's such a devoted fan of Ukraine. And since the beginning of war, she has been disseminating the true information in Facebook, information of what is going on in our country. And she has just expressed her awe of Ukrainian warriors who protect all of us and who defend us. Owing to them, today's event became possible. And I would like us to continue to give the floor to John Carson.
служби США, керівниця
She's the specialist of the USFS and the watershed recovery management. And she will tell us why there is the system of the best management practices in the USFS, how it works. It would be the mutual presentation. John is going to present together with Pauline Adams, hydrologist of the USFS. So the floor is yours, John.
Yeah, just give me a moment to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
In Ukrainian?
Так, українська, yes.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, so yes, my name is Joan Carlson. I'm a hydrologist with the U.S. Forest Service in our national office. And my actual job title is National Watershed Program Leader. And so I have responsibility for pretty much everything surface water related, including water quality, our national BMP program, the Watershed Condition Framework and Watershed Improvement Program, and also municipal watersheds, which are the areas that provide drinking water for millions of people. So I'm happy to speak to you today, and I'm going to talk about best management practices. And about halfway through my presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Pauline, and she'll provide more perspective on BMPs, and then I'll come back and talk to you about BMP monitoring. So best management practices, or BMPs, I'm going to tell you what BMPs are and how they're used, and then Pauline is going to talk to you about using BMPs in practice, and then I'll follow up with BMP monitoring at the end. So Water quality pollution is regulated by our Federal Clean Water Act. It was passed in October of 1972, so we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of this law. Before we had the Federal Clean Water Act, water quality was left up to the individual states to do their own things, and it wasn't working so well. This picture on the left is a picture of the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio, that had a tendency to catch on fire because it was so polluted. And so after it caught on fire again in 1969, that was the motivation for the passage of the Federal Clean Water Act. So the Clean Water Act sets national goals for water quality. The purpose of the act is to restore and maintain chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. So the chemical part is, the chemical constituents like the heavy metals, zinc, cadmium, those kinds of things, also including nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus. Physical water quality is the habitat that it provides for the fish and other fauna that live in the water, including the plants. And then biological water quality is actually the animals and plants that live in the water. And then it also set a national goal that all waters should be able to support fish or other aquatic life and be safe for swimming or other recreation in and on the water body. The Clean Water Act provides federal minimum requirements for water quality standards. And so each state will set water quality standards at least as strict as the federal minimum requirements, and they can provide standards that are more strict, but they can't go any less strict than the federal requirements. And then it also provides a structure for control of water pollution in order to meet those standards. So we classify water pollution in two separate categories. The first one is point source pollution. These are pollutants that are discharged from a pipe or other discrete source. And point sources are controlled by treating the water or the effluent before it is discharged into a water body. And in the Clean Water Act, we have a regulatory permitting system to control the point source pollution. So basically, if you have a factory and you're going to discharge your waste, you need to go to the regulatory authority and say, I need a permit to discharge, and they'll set the amount of pollution you can have in your effluent before you discharge it. And so that's how we control the point sources, and it's actually worked pretty well over the last 50 years. We have not had very many rivers catch on fire anymore because they've been cleaned up. So what I'm going to talk about mostly today is the non-point source pollution. And this is the pollution that is derived over extensive land areas, and it's typically driven by precipitation or snowmelt that will carry the pollutants from the land area into the water body. So non-point source pollution is difficult to control when it happens because the source is such a large area. There's no one place that you can treat it before it reaches the water body. And it's often irregular because it's driven, again, by precipitation. So it's going to happen when it rains, but you never know when it's going to rain. So you have to be prepared before that rain event happens. And in the Clean Water Act, the non-point sources are controlled by best management practices. And so we have a picture here on the right that shows the various sources of non-point source pollution. So you can get non-point source pollution from, housing developments, urban areas, agriculture with the croplands, livestock and feedlots. And then what we're going to talk about is the forest management piece, the forest cutting up here in the hills. So best management practices are measures or practices that are used before, during, or after the activity to reduce pollution from entering the water. And so we have best management practices for all of the non-point source pollution types. So we have forestry best management practices, We have BMPs for urban development. We have BMPs for agriculture and for mining. And then there's, every other conceivable non-point source. We have best management practices for those. So we're going to talk about forest management BMPs. And the purpose of the BMPs in the forested environment is to basically prevent the bad things from happening so you don't have to go back and fix them later. So the purpose again is to avoid, minimize, or mitigate direct and indirect adverse impacts to soil, water, and riparian resources to protect water quality and aquatic communities. And the idea here is if you can prevent bad things from happening, it's a lot better than having to go back and fix it later. So when we talk about direct and indirect impacts, what are we talking about? So direct impacts includes mechanical disturbance to a water body, changes in water routing through the watershed, and loss of ground cover. Those would be direct effects of our logging activities and road building activities. Indirect effects include things like increased stream temperature from the loss of shade when you cut trees next to the water body, accelerated erosion from compacted soil and bare ground, and loss of aquatic habitat from changes in flow, introduction of sedimentation to the water body, and reduction in wood recruitment, or, if you cut the trees next to the stream, then there's going to be less opportunity in the future for those trees to fall into the stream and create habitat. So again, our BMP principles, the first one is to avoid impacts. So things you can do to avoid the impacts are to avoid sensitive areas, like the areas near a water body. The picture on the left shows a landing that is too close to the stream. The stream is there in the background. The red arrow is pointing at it. Other things you can do is to conduct your operations, or to avoid conducting your operations during wet periods when the machinery can get bogged down and cause rutting and excessive compaction and stuff like that. In parts of the US, we use winter logging, or we do our logging operations in the winter when the ground is frozen as a way to avoid compacting the soil. The second principle is to minimize our impacts. Ways that we do this are to limit the size and extent of the disturbed areas. We can reduce the intensity of disturbance. So the picture on the upper left is a picture of cable logging, where they're logging on a steep slope and they're using a cable system to drag the logs up the hill. So basically they're only dragging one end of the log, and they're not dragging the whole log across the ground. We want to discourage concentrating runoff and encourage infiltration. So the picture on the bottom left is a culvert that has riprap or rocks below the outlet, and that dissipates the energy and encourages the water to spread out. And you can see there that the water is spreading out below the culvert, and it is the water has been slowed down sufficiently so it's not going to cause a rill or a gully to form below that culvert. And then we want to disconnect disturbed areas from the water body. So the picture on the bottom right shows some bare ground soil with the black thing is a silt fence, and then there's some hay bales there. And so whatever sediment moves off of that bare area, it'll be trapped by the silt fence before it enters the water body. And then ideally in this picture, we would like to see some sort of mulch cover on top of that bare area to prevent raindrop impact from dislodging the soil particles. And then the third principle is to mitigate after we're done. So we want to restore our disturbed area once the use ends. And so the three photos on the left show them removing a stream crossing after they don't need the road anymore. And you can see that they've restored it so that the water can flow without being obstructed by the culvert. And then they've provided some mulch there to prevent erosion into the water body. And then the picture on the bottom right is a road that they have decommissioned, and they went through and they used a plow type device to to scarify it and reduce the compaction, and then they seeded it with plants to encourage ground cover to grow. So again, looking at some specific examples on how to avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts for log landings. To avoid it, you would want to locate the landing at least 30 meters from a water body. You would want to choose a flat area so that gravity doesn't work as well. I mean, if you put it on a slope, then gravity is going to carry the water off. Whereas if it's a relatively flat area, then you're not going to have as much runoff. And then you want to conduct your operations in a dry or frozen condition so that you don't have equipment getting stuck on the landing or, muddying up the soil. To minimize impacts, you would keep the landing as small as possible. I mean, you need to make it big enough so that you can have safe operations, but you don't need to make it overly big. And then you would want to install erosion barriers along the downhill side to prevent whatever sediment comes off the landing from reaching a water body. And then to mitigate your effects when you're done, again, you could what we call subsoil or plow the landing to reduce the soil compaction. Then we would seed with native grasses to provide ground cover. And then we would also mulch the landing to protect the soil surface until the ground cover, the native vegetation reestablishes. Then in terms of roads, things you can do to avoid, minimize, or mitigate effects. You want to locate the road at least 30 meters from a water body if possible. You want to avoid unstable slopes, steep grades, and sharp curves. To minimize effects, you want to design the road drainage to disperse the surface runoff in a manner that encourages infiltration. And then you want to limit the number of stream crossings. I mean, crossing streams with the road is unavoidable, but you want to try to not have more than you need. You want to limit the number of crossings that you have. And then finally, to mitigate, we would close or decommission the roads when the need for the road ended. Over the years, there's been a lot of research on the effectiveness of forestry BMPs. And so the research has shown that forestry BMPs are effective for reducing impacts to water yield, water quality, and site productivity. They're also effective at protecting and maintaining water chemistry, nutrient levels, stream habitat, and stream biota, and at reducing sediment production and movement from forestry operations. So the overall big takeaway from forest BMPs is the greatest sediment problems have resulted from a forestry operation when BMPs have not been properly implemented. And then I provided this reference paper, Kristan et al. In 2016. It's a literature review of the research that's been done on forestry best management practices in the United States. And I provided Natalia a copy of that. So that's a good one to look at. And now I will pass it over to Pauline, and she can tell you more about BMPs.
Yeah, thanks, Joan. All right, give us a moment while we switch screens. Hopefully it will. How's that? You see the presentation mode?
Not quite yet.
Not yet.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, I thought I saw it come up already. On my end, it looked like it came
Maybe
up.
you can increase the percentage to 100. Yes, now perfect.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go back to the beginning. So yeah, thank you so much, Joan, for giving that great introduction. I'm going to go into just some of the really basic best management practices for logging, and hopefully, it's a team effort is basically what I wanted to show. So even if you don't have a hydrologist or a biologist, there I am. You can work within the staff that you have, and some of these practices are very simple. And so hopefully you can start to think about it and then apply it. And I always say, go out together, look at things in the field, and find options. So basically, when I come onto a project and I'm working with foresters, there'll be some sort of preliminary logging plan. And so these are the key best management practices that I focus on. So mapping the wet areas, applying like water body buffers, so areas that we want to protect, planning out those road and stream crossings, to minimize how many times we're crossing a stream. Looking at the road design, roads have the biggest impact for water quality. Just sediment is pollution. And so we're looking to how to design the road to have the lightest impact on the land. And then certainly there's a maintenance aspect with our roads and our best management practices, and then focusing on some rehabilitation. So those are the topics that I'm going to go through. And this is just an example of what I call a preliminary logging plan or a pre-harvest plan. So it's something that the loggers are working on, how do we get to certain areas to get, log this unit, for example. And so we'll talk about, a map of the units, the timing matters, when you're going to go out there, like in the winter, or is this going to be in the spring where things could be very wet, and just plan for that road alignment. And so this is just an example of, a map that I'll get, and here will be some main roads and some skid roads, and then here's a landing. And so it's just an opportunity to really look at, minimizing impacts to wet areas and minimizing soil impacts. So something like this, I might look at, go out in the field and say, wow, it's really close to this stream. Is there a way to move it up here? You have to look at the topography and everything, but this is a chance to really focus on, you have an initial plan for logging. Now, how do we focus on some water quality? So the first part is just really thinking about, where are your wet areas? And depending on the time of year, in the spring, you might have a lot more wet areas or springs that can be perennial or intermittent. And so perennial are like very easy, you see the stream and it's wet all the time. The intermittent streams are a little bit trickier, where you'll go by and maybe there'll be a lot of water, and then maybe later in the season, in the dry season, they can go completely dry. And then ephemeral water bodies tend to be the ones that are mostly dry, and then they flow in response to rain or snow. So just kind of knowing what is in your system and where they are is sort of the first step. You don't have to be a hydrologist to do this. I think, this is very simple. This is basic stuff. Anybody can do this work. And it's fun. And why it's important is that, one of the most important practice for protecting water quality is having a buffer, having a filter strip on the side of a water body so that the pollution isn't running directly into the water body, right? So the sediment, petroleum off these cars and hauling, equipment isn't going directly into the stream. And so the stream buffer is really important. And basically, this is just an example of how, if you have increasing slopes, you'd have a larger buffer. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this. Let's see, I'm going to flip to my notes here. So yeah, we want to consider the erosiveness of the soil, the stream banks, but mainly this is showing your filter area and why it's so important to just have a space in between your impact and the water body. And this table is just an example of some kind of, different widths as you increase your slope. As your hill slope increases, you want to have a larger buffer. You need more space for water to filter before it gets to the stream. And I did want to just point out that a lot of the figures and information that I'm showing has been translated from a New Hampshire State Best Management Practices Manual. And so I did want participants to know that there's a whole manual that's available translated in Ukraine that they can look at these tables and get a better sense of it. So we'll make sure that everybody has access to that. And so, yeah, in the United States, we actually paint our stream buffers. But if you don't have paint or that's too much work, you can flag it. And we usually use blue. Blue is the color that would indicate to a logger, somebody out on the ground, that there's a sensitive resource out there. And so mainly it's just, deciding, what are your sort of minimum buffers in the United States and in the forest that I had been working on. For perennial streams, we'd have a minimum of 30-meter buffer. For those intermittent streams, we'd have a 15-meter minimum buffer. And then for ephemeral, we still protect those and have an 8-meter buffer. And so there can be different things that happen in the buffers, but they just have to be clearly defined. So here's just a picture of like a smaller channel coming in and a bigger, stream system that has a larger buffer. And so it's more just to think about, what kinds of activities would be appropriate or not, like particularly in ephemeral channels. And then I really wanted to talk about road crossings. There's a lot of different options for crossings, and it's just one of the most important places to have a best management practice, because obviously we have roads and the crossing is the direct impact to having sediment and petroleum and other things go directly into the water source. So depending on the stream type and the hauling needs, you can think about what options are available. So in this case, this is sort of the best case scenario where you have a perennial stream and you have a temporary bridge. We call these temporary bridges, and they can be different materials. This is a steel plate. We also use like timber mats or like logs. You can put logs down and get equipment across. I've also seen kind of lumber, fit together as matting, all those timber mats. So there's different ways that you can get across streams. And for more intermittent streams or perennial streams, we also look at temporary and permanent culverts. And so depending, again, this is like permanent culvert, a big road system that needs a permanent culvert, and you have some riprap on the side to stabilize it so that you don't have sediment just coming right into the channel. But you can have temporary culverts. And so I just wanted to show that, there's different options. If they're temporary, you might have plastic pipes that are more available or cheaper. And then I've even seen rock culverts. So just, use what materials you can have, you can gather essentially. But having stream crossings, defined, well-defined, is really important. And then, I was told that you all use a lot of fords. And so fording, typically in the United States, we would ford on intermittent or ephemeral streams. And so in that case, you just want to have the most direct crossing. So they just say a 90-degree crossing, like a direct cross, to shorten the distance of the crossing, and have there be some drainage into a vegetated area instead of directly into the stream. And then we also gravel the approaches. So we put kind of riprap or gravel to sort of trap some of the sediment before it goes into the creek. So some things to think about there. And lastly, I just wanted to show another example. This works on steeper embankments, but if you had like an ephemeral channel, you'd still have to have some drainage here. But I did want to just show an example of, there's ways that you can use the timber materials, the small poles, to just keep your wheels out of the creek, essentially. So now I'm going to talk about some of the road design piece, which is really important. Just wanting to focus on how to minimize soil compaction and erosion. So looking at how to essentially have a road be as light on the land as possible. That's what we call it, light on the land. Minimizing cut and fills, stabilizing steep slopes, and providing drainage, right? So we don't want roads that are saturated. It's not good for your equipment, and it's definitely not good for rehabilitation. So this is more of an engineering road design where you're looking at the contours of the land and deciding if you can get drainage through an inslope with a ditch, or if you can outslope and have it naturally drain without a ditch. And then in the United States, we also have a lot of crowned roads where you have a ditch on one side and it's draining off. And so it's really just kind of matching the road and the design with the natural contours of the land. And that way you're just minimizing that cut and fill portion of the road and that destabilized soil. So just some concepts to think about there. I'll go back. So just thinking about like haul roads and skid roads as well, right? We don't want to just go all over and compact the surface or have, you know, improper drainage. So we really want to focus on, you know, minimizing the number of skids. So again, just sort of planning out how are you going to access an area, skidding upslope on the contour to disperse runoff. And again, installing some drainage, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. So some great options for drainage if you have a haul road where you still need drainage, but you don't want to have, you want to have a pretty even flow of hauling, you can use a rolling dip, which is like a broad-based. So it's a much more broad, this picture is a little hard to just to see it, but water would come down here, hit this dip and go this way, right? And then this is a diagram of water bars, which are kind of smaller versions of a rolling dip. And this spacing here is really important as you have a steeper road surface and road slope, you have, you know, closer water bars to each other. So again, this table and those distances are found in the BMP manual that's been translated. So this would be a great table to look at. And also we want to disperse the energy at the end. And so you can use slash or rocks or, you know, logs, whatever you have to sort of help disperse that water flow. And second, I'm going to talk about, you know, the maintenance of the roads and the culverts are really important. So we look at the weather ahead of time, right? And really try to anticipate that next storm event and make sure that your roads have proper drainage, your culverts aren't clogged, you know, which, you know, if your culverts are clogged, you can overtop these roads. And then you have a lot of sediment coming, you know, off your road and damaged culverts. So it's really important to do the maintenance, and it's constant, right? And so, yeah, avoiding working in wet conditions is one of the best things that we can do for that as well. And then, yeah, so this is just another example of like doing some maintenance for sediment. We call these sediment traps or sediment basins. So, you know, water's coming off the road and it's being ditched into an area and being held so that the water can dissipate into the ground versus just running into this, you know, creek or something down below here. This is also showing some closure and some mulching here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is a log landing here where you can see, you know, it's been, you know, they definitely get beat up when you're working in wetter conditions. And so mainly was just trying to control kind of sediment and water runoff from a log landing is really important as well. So having those filter areas. And we'll talk about a little bit about rehabilitation. This is just a really important part. After the logging operation in the United States, we use a lot of slash to close out roads. So all the small timbers or limbs or whatever you have available, we use to kind of slow down the water, restore this contour as best as possible. And where you can't restore contour, we use seed and mulch and actually block access so people aren't driving on these roads and that they can actually start having natural infiltration again. And lastly, I think, you know, this was a really cute picture I got off your Ukrainian forestry website, but this is all about, you know, reforesting, either plantings or again, seeding and mulching, something to restore ground cover. And that's really the end of my presentation. And then Joan is going to talk about how we monitor some of this work. And so I'll hold questions until after Joan does her last part, and then we.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Joan, hopefully you can share your screen again.
Let's see, current slide.
I'm sorry, I did go through that a little fast because I thought we were running a little bit behind time. So I'll take any questions in the chat or, after Joan does this last piece on monitoring.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, and we see the slides. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about BMP monitoring. The Forest Service has what we call our non-point source management strategy, and this is in our policy documents. And so our strategy is to implement the BMPs, as Pauline talked about, and then we go out and monitor those BMPs, and then we adjust our BMPs or our management activities based on the results of the monitoring efforts. And this is how we document compliance with the Clean Water Act. If you recall, I said that BMPs are how the Clean Water Act directs us to control non-point source pollution. So we need to be able to document that we are indeed doing that. So why do we monitor BMPs? The first reason is to learn from what we did. We go back out there and look and see if we did what we said we were going to do and if it worked. And then we also monitor our projects so that we can correct any problems that we find. And then the overall goal is to do better the next time, to learn from what we did. And, if it didn't work, then we need to change our practices to something that will work better. So we have two types of BMP monitoring. The first is what we call implementation monitoring. And basically the question we're trying to answer there is, did we do what we said we were going to do? So did we implement the BMPs that we included in our logging plan that Pauline talked about? And then the second type of monitoring is effectiveness monitoring. And that basically asks the question, did it work? So when we installed the BMPs as we said we were going to do, did it work to protect water quality? So implementation monitoring, for example, in our logging plan, we could have said we want to provide erosion control on our skid roads, skid trails, and other temporary roads. And the things that we prescribed, we could have said we were going to install water bars on the skid roads at 15-meter spacing, and then we were going to place slash on the skid roads following the road closure. And so here on the left, we have a picture of a skid road where they did not do that. You can see there's no water bars and there's no slash spread on the skid trail. And then versus the picture on the right, where you can kind of see some water bars have been installed, and then there's woody material left on the skid trail. So we would say for the picture on the left that we did not implement the BMPs, and the picture on the right that we did indeed implement those BMPs. Then the second type of monitoring, again, is effectiveness monitoring. And so how you do that is you inspect the site and you look for evidence of direct and indirect effects on soil and water resources. And then we infer effectiveness of the BMPs from the observations of pollutants and pollutant movement. So if we go out on the site and we see, evidence of water going around the culvert instead of through the culvert, or we see, so that would be the picture on the upper left. So that would be a picture of a BMP that was not effective, and it could be because the culvert was improperly placed, or just that the amount of water, was too much for that culvert. In the top middle, we see there's a water bar that is functioning properly, but you can see that there's some accumulation of sediment behind that water bar. The picture on the upper right shows evidence of rills forming on the landing as it's leaving the landing there. The picture on the bottom left is a fuel tank, and there's evidence that fuel was spilled. So that would be a indication that the BMP was not effective in terms of preventing fuel spills. The picture in the bottom middle is a gully that formed from a road that failed. So that would be ineffective BMPs. And then again, on the bottom right, we have a sediment deposit from from excessive erosion. So that would be another indication that our BMPs were not properly effective. So how to conduct BMP monitoring? There's many different ways of doing it that can vary from pretty simple to pretty elaborate. And I'm just going to talk about a fairly simple method that is used by many of the states in the country to monitor their BMPs. So the first thing you want to do is select a subset of projects to monitor. I mean, you could monitor all of your activities, but if you're like us, we have many more projects than we could monitor. So you want to pick a subset of those projects. We do our monitoring with what we call an interdisciplinary team of people. So you want to have, you know, a hydrologist, a forester, engineer, you know, soil scientist if you have them. Just a group of people that have different perspectives on the project. And then we like to have the people who actually plan the project or carried out the project to be the ones out there doing the monitoring so that they can learn from what they did. You know, they prescribed the BMP, so they should be the ones out there looking to see if they worked as they were intended. And then you want to allow at least one wet season, but not too many, to pass before you monitor the project. Again, non-point source pollution is primarily driven by precipitation events, particularly when you're talking about sediment or, you know, movement of chemicals, that kind of stuff. So not sure of the weather patterns you have in Ukraine, but for here in our country, you know, we would typically complete the project in 1 year and then wait until the following winter and do the monitoring in the next spring or summer. And then you need to have a method to collect your monitoring observations, such as a paper form or a digital form. And then once you're done, you want to prepare a summary report to document the findings that you found. So this picture is a picture of a group of people going out to look at a timber sale, clear cut unit. And so when you're doing this monitoring, basically what we do is we have the ID team. You can see there's a bunch of people here, and then we go out to the site and we just walk through the project, and everybody, you know, picks a direction and they go and they look and see what has been done. And then after everybody has had the opportunity to walk through the unit, then we get back together and we'll go through the monitoring form to document what people have seen. So I provided an example of a monitoring form. This one happens to be from the state of Colorado, and I provided that to Natalia. So this is the header page, and here we collect information on the location of the site, the description of the site. You might have like the geology if that's important, and then like the parent material that's there, the slope of the site, soil erodibility, those types of things. And then you also collect information about what activity occurred, you know, when the roads were constructed or reconstructed, what was the logging method, that kind of stuff. And then you have the data, the monitoring, the members of the review team. And then this also has these boxes over here, which are the scoring criteria. And I apologize that I did not provide them in a way that could be interpreted for you. But basically, the ratings are, in this case, they call it application instead of implementation, but it's rated on a 5-point scale, with 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. So for example, for application, a 5 is given if the operation exceeded the requirements of the BMP, and then a 1 is given if the observations indicate a gross neglect of BMPs, and then the 2, 3, and 4 are gradations between those extremes. Similarly, for effectiveness, a 5 is if you're observing improved protection of soil and water resources over the pre-project condition, and a 1 is given if you're observing major and prolonged impacts on soil and water resources, and then 2, 3, and 4 again are gradations between those extremes. And then the other pages of the form is basically a table where you have on the left, you have a list of the BMPs. so these could come, for example, if we did this for the New Hampshire BMPs that have been provided to you, you would have a list of those BMPs on the left. Then you'd have a column. The first column here is to indicate whether that BMP is applicable to the site or not, because the BMP handbook has a whole bunch of BMPs and not all of them may be applicable to every site. So you make a judgment as to whether that BMP was applicable. And then there's a column here to capture your application score and another column for your effectiveness score. And then the last column is to gather comments, any comments on the observations that you want to make. And so again, the group comes together and they'll go through this form and they go through BMP by BMP and they come to a consensus as to whether the BMP was applicable to the site, and then the 1 to 5 rating for application and effectiveness. And then you can summarize the monitoring results. This happens to be an example from the state of Wyoming. In this case, they looked at 6 different timber sales, which are listed across the top. And then on the left, they have the BMPs, and then they have the scores for application and effectiveness for each of those sites. So again, you know, a 4 is a pretty good score since 5 is the best. And then you can do statistics and you can add up, you know, the number of 4s that you have versus the number of 3s, you know, in the different categories. And you can summarize them in a table like the one shown on the right here. So again, you have the 5 categories. They have the 5 is here on the left, exceeded BMPs, and then the ones on the right, gross neglect. And you can see the percentage of the BMPs that were in the various categories. And you can also do, you know, charts and graphs of the data as well. And then again, you can, if you continue to do monitoring, you know, year after year, you could compare your results over time. So here's a table. This again is from Wyoming that shows they did monitoring in 2000, 2004, and 2007. Typically, the states will do their monitoring every 2 years, and you can track and see if, you know, if your performance has improved or not. And then finally, after the monitoring's done, then they'll write up a monitoring report. And here are some examples from Colorado, Indiana, Montana, and Wyoming. And I provided this one from my Wyoming to Natalia for you guys. So yeah, so you've documented your results and you can go back and look at them to see, you know, what you did. So in summary, in terms of BMPs, the best management practices are used to control non-point sources of pollution and pollutants in forest management. The BMP principles are to avoid, minimize, or mitigate adverse effects to soil, water, and riparian resources. Literature has shown that forestry BMPs are effective at protecting water quality in aquatic communities. The Forest Service non-point source management strategy is to implement those BMPs, monitor the BMPs, and adjust our management activities based on the monitoring results. And we do 2 types of monitoring. We do BMP implementation to see if our BMPs were used as we planned. And then we look at BMP effectiveness to see if they're working as we thought they would. And then the BMP monitoring allows for tracking patterns and trends in BMP implementation and effectiveness over time. And it also allows us to identify deficiencies in our management that we can correct, and provides documentation to show that we are complying with the Federal Clean Water Act. And so with that, we can take questions.
Та щиро дякую, Джоан і Паулін за
Thank you, Joan and Pauline, for such an extended piece of information. And we have the first question in chat from Oksana. For how long have you been monitoring the unit? How long do you monitor the unit?
Typically, you'll go back once, but if you find something that needs to be corrected, you can, you know, make that correction, and then you can go back again and monitor it again later. For our program, the Forest Service program, we try to look at a distribution of units across the country. So typically we only go and monitor once, but there's nothing that says you can't go back multiple times if you want to. But we just have so many that, you know, if we hit it once, we're doing good.
Дякую. І які показники відображені?
Thank you. And what indicators are in the table you have shown in percentage? So what is the data in the tables where you have the percentages on this?
Do you want me to go back and share that?
Можна. Так.
So the table, this one or the next one, this one. We'll get there. Okay, so in this particular table, the left-hand column, the top table is the application monitoring or the implementation monitoring, and the bottom part of the table is the effectiveness monitoring. This column on the left indicates the years that they did the monitoring. Now, each year they went to different sites, so it's not like they went to the same site over and over again. So they've monitored different sites in each of the different years. So the first column here is exceeded BMP, so that would be the 5 on their rating scale. Oops. And so you have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So these percentages would be the percent of the BMPs that got that rating out of all of the BMPs they looked at. So 2% of in 2000, 2001, 2% of the BMPs they looked at were rated a 5 for application. 90% of them were rated a 4 or met BMP standards. And then you go across the table to the gross neglect column, which shows a 0. So that means that none of them were rated as a 1. And so then similarly at the bottom, you know, this column here, improved conditions, 3% of the BMPs were rated as improved condition. 90% of them were rated as adequate protection, and so on. So this is 3, 2, and 1, and none of them were showing major and prolonged effects. Does that help?
Так, дякую, Джоан. Сподіваюся, Оксана, ви отримали відповідь на
Thank you,
своє.
Joan. Hopefully the asker has got the answer. And we have one more question from Mr. Oleg Gnatyuk. He is asking about the reference literature. You refer to some articles in the end of your presentation, and where can we get the link to these materials? And we suppose they're in English, of course, right?
Yeah, I provided a copy to Natalia of this. See where can we get it?
Я думаю, що це був один із останніх слайдів.
It's a pre-last
It
slide.
was the slide, the
This
one
one
before
here.
the last.
Yeah, so this is it was an article that was in the Forest Ecology and Management journal, and here's the reference to it. And I provided a hard copy to Natalia, and I'm not sure with firewalls and all that stuff if you guys have access to this particular journal, but I was able to get it online, and it's in English, of course, but
Так, дякую, Джоан. Я ще додам, що у нас є вже матеріали.
Thank you, John. And let me add, we've got the materials. They have been translated into Ukrainian, and everyone registered can receive these materials. So it's up to you. We will provide the links to these materials. We, of course, can also share the links to English language materials or sources. Are there any other questions? Yes, let me also clarify that we got the most recent copy of this journal, and the article highlights the best management practices for Wyoming. We've got also the materials for New Hampshire, and the article mentioned was the literature review. It was a review of the articles pertaining to the efficiency of the best management practices. We've got these materials in English. So whatever we've got, we will share with you. We want to introduce you to these materials, of course. And we see raised
Thank you for this very
a
good
hand from
information.
Sergey.
I have a question basically about mitigation treatments. You noted that you like a restore even forest roads that don't use into a national naturally conditioned state and use native species for it. And I think it is applicable for Ukraine to do that because we don't have a bank of seeds of native species. Because in terms of forest ecology, each forest type has its own set of typical species. So how you deal it in the USA? And another part of a question, or maybe it is a comment, because like in Ukraine, forest roads, they used not only for forestry issues, but also as a part of a system of fire barriers. So maybe it is not applicable for Ukraine to restore all that roads because we use it to decrease fire risks. So thank you.
Pauline, do you want to answer that or do you want me to?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't close or decommission all of the logging roads. We have we do an analysis of our road systems to determine which roads we need to keep open, like you said, for fire access and for recreation and all those other things. We only decommission those roads that we know or we're pretty sure we're not going to use again. And then we have different levels of decommissioning depending on you know how much money we have at the time, you know, what the potential impacts of that road are, and whether we think we might use that road again in the future. So in some cases, we just put a barrier up at the front of the road so people can't travel on it. And we may, you know, we may do some treatment of the culverts on that road to ensure that they're not plugged, but we basically just leave the road the way it is. And then it ranges from that all the way up to, you know, totally restoring the slope again and, you know, removing the road prism and all that kind of stuff. And so there's various gradations of decommissioning that we use. And since we do a lot of it, there's nurseries that will provide native seed. And if we don't have native seed, sometimes we'll use a grass species that we know is not going to proliferate. So we can use that temporarily to just provide ground cover until the vegetation surrounding that road can naturally seed into the road. But we want to have some sort of plant species on that road to provide that ground cover, you know, soon after the road has been done. But we're fortunate that we have sources of local seed that we can use.
Дякую, дякую,
Thank you.
Джоан.
I'm impressed of this practice. It's really cool.
Дякую, Сергію. Я перепрошую.
Thank you, Sergey. I'm so sorry. You see that we have planned to work until 5 p.m. and it's 5:07. I know that it's the end of the working day for many of our participants. Many of them have their issues and many of people are experiencing blackouts. I have a question. I've got a brief piece of information for you regarding the methodological recommendations developed for Ukraine. We've got 2 recommendations which should be considered. And our interpreters can work till 5:15. Our Ukrainian participants might be willing to listen to these recommendations, provided they have enough spare time. But I'm not going to delay you for a long time. Unless you've got questions to John and Pauline, we can proceed with these recommendations. We will just inform you on the sources of information related to these recommendations. So, do you have questions addressed to Joan, Ted, or Pauline? I do not see any raised hands. Neither questions in the chat. Therefore, my colleague Yuri Derbal is launching the screen. So, Yuri, you've got just 6 minutes to present these recommendations very briefly. Yes, we can see and hear. Thank you. The participants will be very brief. Let me dwell on these recommendations. My colleagues focused mainly on the outcomes of the recommendations implementations, with the less focus on the assessment itself. But upon the assessment, the recommendations can be developed for further mitigation or a restoration. No, there are no doubts. We know that the water is indispensable for all living organisms, including humans. Here you see the map of Zakarpattia. There are over 9,000 streams and rivers covering the area of nearly 20,000 square kilometers. So water is very essential. Why actually are we discussing this? As you have heard from the authorities, we do not use watershed principles for forestry purposes. Therefore, our events are designed to bring these American practices and experiences to the attention of Ukrainian authorities. We want these practices to be implemented in Ukraine. Recently, Verkhovna Rada has made the amendments to the law on the National Environmental Monitoring System. I hope that our activities, our today's webinar, will be a contribution to the ultimate iteration of this draft. I hope that the methodological recommendations will be useful as well. Due to them, the WCF may become a part of the national environmental monitoring. Of course, it depends on the authorities, on the ministry, to which extent they will try to integrate this framework into Ukrainian monitoring system. You have been listening to our colleagues' presentations, and you've learned that there are lots of factors impacting the watersheds, especially technological factors. Everywhere you saw the roads, examples of roads, erosion, trailing, and so on. So these recommendations have the aim to protect the watersheds, just like in the US. First of all, we have to protect the watersheds which are still in good condition. And then the disturbed watersheds can be also restored by means of the practices presented by our American colleagues. Of course, this WCF should become a reality for Ukrainian forests, first and foremost for the Carpathian forests and other forests of our country. I'm not going to dwell on the details. We will disseminate these materials among you. But I'd like to reiterate some things you've heard. To assess the watershed condition, 12 indicators are used. 5 of them characterize aquatic environments and 7 terrestrial processes. You've seen this, you've heard this during the presentations. And the aquatic indicators play the main role, over 60 of them. 60% of them. So the first indicator is the quality of water. Both physical and chemical processes are subject to the assessment. There is another indicator, namely the amount of water, the amount of discharge. It should be assessed whether the activities disturb the process of discharge. So you see the volumes of water. The third indicator is the assessment of habitats, aquatic habitats, first of all. So we have to assess what are the barriers for their proper functioning. And our American colleagues have informed you on that issue. Then fragmentation, artificial fragmentation. There are multiple examples in the Carpathians of such fragmentation. And there is also example of natural fragmentation. It's quite a unique situation for our forests when the trees get into the channels, and these trees are small ecosystems which provide nutrients for many microorganisms. Of course, in some cases, these dead trees improve the quality of water because this is organic materials. On the other hand, the trees support systems of microorganisms living in the streams. Okay, channels. Another indicator is biota. That's aquatic biota, fish and the microorganisms living in the streams. There is another indicator. It's specific for riparian vegetation. Our foresters, unfortunately, do not admit that logging is harmful for riparian vegetation as well. There is another important indicator for the Carpathians, namely the status of the roads, the network of trails and passages. Unless the roads are maintained properly, the soils erode, and this is the negative impact for the environment. Here you see the pictures made in Ukraine. Ukrainians often see such situations in the Carpathians, erosion in the Carpathians. Sometimes we are not aware of the damage inflicted to the Carpathians by the trails. This is the village of Polana. Two forestries are located nearby, and huge areas are used for the roads, and this is, of course, a non-productive use of the forest areas. What's this? There is another indicator, namely the status of the soils. This indicator is used to assess the erosion processes and the pollution of soils. This methodology gives us a chance to assess the processes running within a certain watershed. Another indicator is forest fires. Foresters have adapted the requirements to Ukrainian context. So these recommendations are available in the Ukrainian language. It's possible to assess the impact of the forest fires, both planned and natural. There is another indicator, assessment of forestation. In our case, we are affected by deforestation. Entire groups of trees disappear as a result of hostilities. You might have heard about that. Nearly 3 million hectares of forest were affected by the hostilities. This indicator helps us assess the areas mostly affected. So that's the map of deforestation. You see the areas of logging. Logging is committed frequently upstream at the source of the streams, and this is very harmful. Then the next indicator is assessment of ranges. Ranges cover small areas in our case, unlike the US. Therefore, US focuses more on this indicator. And there is another indicator, invasive species in watersheds. Due to the climate changes, the invasive species have become quite hazardous for Ukrainian landscape, soils, and waters. Thus, this indicator enables us to assess the level of their impact.
На ліси від шкідників і хвороб, масове всихання лісів, забруднення повітря.
Mass dryness of the forest, air pollution. So thank you so much. I will try to be short. I will try to answer all your questions in case you have such. So in case you would like, I can share my presentation with you. I can also, as we have lack of time, I would like to answer your questions as well. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Yuri Yurich. For this presentation, I would like to add, it's an important stage in our cooperation with the State Forest Agency. So to approve those methodological recommendations to make them effective for our foresters to use them, apply them, everything presented by our American colleagues, and what our recommendations are focused on. These are the practical points that help to solve the issues if such happen, to prevent such situations, and also to prevent the worsening of the situation, and to preserve the quality of water sheds. Thank you everyone staying with us till this very minute. Do you have any questions? Questions you would like to ask right now, or maybe have some comments? While you're thinking, I would like to say a few words about our next steps. As we have promised in chat, we are going to send out all the available information via the email you have indicated when registering. We will also discuss this with our specialists, whether they would like to share their materials. And our next step, we're planning to provide more extended trainings on what you've heard today. So today you had an overview, some description. So that was the first touch. So further on, having to plan trainings for us to provide more information on how it works in the USA and how it might work here. So once again, thank you so much, our experts, our speakers today. Chalet, probably you would like to say a few words as the closing remarks. Thank you, our dear audience. Thank you, the armed forces of Ukraine, for we are able to see each other today, to meet each other, and I hope for the future cooperation. Thank you, our interpreters working with us. Chalet, you're welcome.
Slava Ukraini!
О,
Героям слава.
героям слава. Дякую.
Героям слава.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Lesia you said. Just thank you to everyone for making time to be here and participate and listen. Thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you, huge thank you again to Forza and all of our special guests that were here today. I hope you all stay safe and Ukraine continues to be in our thoughts and prayers.
Щиро дякую всім. Бажаю безпечного і
Thank you, everyone. Have a safe, secure evening. Thank you.